Sweet. Hi guys, I'm Emily. And okay, so to go off of social cognitive theory, what Sam I think was talking about. Sorry, I'm filming this recording before him. So um, anyway, so Bandura described observational learning as how people learn by observing actions and behaviors. Observations can come from just about anything. Our book mentions how people observe natural phenomena, plants, animals, waterfalls, the motion of the moon and stars, and so forth. So the list goes on and on. But a main thing Bandura emphasized is learning from observing other people. So the core of observational learning is modeling. And so modeling. Um, so, people are surrounded by influential models who demonstrate certain behaviors that can be learned and imitated. Observers often model after those that have a higher status than them and or people who are similar to them, as in age or gender. So, girls will likely model after girls or women, and vice versa with boys and men. Okay, so for different modeling examples, people, mostly children, can base their modeling off of many different individuals, and these can include most often parents, friends, teachers, television and movie characters, and so on. Okay, so what actions are being modeled and imitated in observational learning relate to reinforcement. So Bandura taught that positive and or negative reinforcements does enact learning, but it is not necessary for learning to occur. So Bandura's thoughts on reinforcement and learning differ from B.F. Skinner. We didn't learn about him in this class, but if you didn't know, I'm trying to think. He said that reinforcement has to be present for a child to learn. But Bandura says, yeah, that can happen, but reinforcement is not actually necessary. So, hold on, where am I? Okay, so reinforcement often leads to a change in one's behavior, which depends on if it matches that individual's needs or not. So I always confuse positive and negative reinforcement personally, so I added definitions here. So positive reinforcement is when you add a stimulus to increase a future behavior, and negative reinforcement is removing the stimulus to increase a future behavior. So both positive and negative reinforcement, since they're reinforcement, they increase the future behavior, but the difference is that positive adds the stimulus and negative removes the stimulus. So, yeah. Okay. Hold on. So, Bandura noticed 4 steps or stages that relate to and help enact his theory of observational learning. These include attention, retention, reproduction, and motivation. So, attention is when the individual notices something in the environment, so that's a very basis starter of it all. Retention is when the individual remembers what they have noticed. So, when they remember it, they kind of like retain it. Well, yeah, that's retention. And yeah, I don't know where I was going with that, but anyway. So after they retain what they have observed, they reproduce it. So yeah, they produce the action that they previously noticed. And lastly, motivation. The individual must be motivated to have some sort of desire to reproduce the action. So that's the beginning portion of motivation. They have to be motivated for some reason to produce it in the future. For example, with a TV character, if they're watching a superhero and they climbed a tree to save a cat, that was the most basic answer, or example. But if they watch that and they try to climb a tree later, so that's like their motivation because they saw a good deed that was done in the past, so they're motivated to do that in the future. And then for motivation, this can also be changed based on how the person's environment's responds to that behavior. So with reinforcement or punishment. So with motivation after the individual produces the observed behavior, if they get bad reactions from their parents or from other forms of the environment, their friends, other people, etc., that can determine if they will be motivated to continue reproducing that behavior. So even in the future, more from that, if that made any sense. I hope it did. Okay, so, going back to that. So by combining all these processes, the observer is actually able to recognize and reproduce the different behaviors that they have seen. Okay, so one main experiment that, sorry, this arrow is kind of annoying. One main experiment that Bandura researched and performed is the Bobo doll study or experiment. This correlates with his observational learning theory. Okay, so this experiment was performed in the 1960s. I believe it was 1961. And it was studied to show the social behaviors in children. So yeah, Bandura mostly studied observation with children. You can do it with anyone, people of any age, but this study in particular goes with children. So the behavior here is chiefly aggression. The sample tested 36 girls and 36 boys ages 3 to 6. And in this experiment, an aggressive model was shown to 24 children. A non-aggressive model was shown to another 24, and the remaining 24 were not shown any model. So I have a picture next that will kind of show and explain that if I didn't explain it very well. So the children were then brought into the room. Oh yeah, so after the aggressive model or non-aggressive model or no model was shown to each of the children, they individually were brought into a room with a one-way mirror. And so each child was alone and they were given a ton of different toys, both aggressive and non-aggressive. So an example of an aggressive toy would be the Bobo doll, and then an example of a non-aggressive toy would be like stuffed teddy bears or a tea set, super breakable. So those would be the different of that. Or that would be the different of those. And the experimenters observed and recorded each of the children's behaviors of how they acted towards each of the toys. Okay, so like I said, here is a picture that describes each of the children. So there were 72 in total. The 24 aggressive role models included both a female and a male. So not both were shown to each of the kids, but, oh my gosh, go away. But like 6 kids had a female model, 6 boys had a female model, 6 girls a female, 6 boys a male, and 6 girls a male. So that shows the differences there. And then for the non-aggressive model, there was also a female and a male. Same with before. And then, the last group there was no model at all. So yeah, okay, so I have a video that further explains the Bobo doll experiment. So let me play it.
The segment you're about to see is taken from an early experiment on learning of aggressive styles of behavior through modeling. Children watched a filmed adult perform novel aggressive acts toward a inflated doll, and the physical aggression was accompanied by novel hostile remarks. We later measured how much of this modeled aggression the children had learned just by watching. Now, the measurement of learning of aggression uses simulated targets rather than live ones. For example, to test how well bombardiers have learned bombing strategies, you would use simulated targets rather than require them to bomb San Francisco or New York. The model pummeled a doll with a mallet, flung it in the air, kicked it repeatedly, threw it down, and beat it.
Okay, I'm pausing it for a second because I have something to say. I think it's interesting that they only show the female aggressive model. I wonder what the male one looked like because I thought it was kind of funny that the woman, when she beat the Bobo doll on the ground, she wasn't beating it very aggressively. I don't know. She was just kind of like gently fisting the doll, I guess. But yeah, so I wonder what the male one would look like. Anyway.
It was once widely believed that seeing others vent aggression would drain the viewer's aggressive drive. As you can see, exposure to aggressive modeling is hardly cathartic. Exposure to aggressive modeling increased attraction to guns, even though it was never modeled. Guns had less appeal to children who had no exposure to the aggressive modeling. The children also picked up the novel hostile language. The room contained varied play materials.
Okay, sorry, it kind of cut off. But yeah, that's the main part of what I wanted to show. So I think this study is super interesting. I mean, I've known about it for a while. It's one of the main first experiments we talk about in psychology. At least I did in my junior college in California. But so this experiment shows just how quickly and easily children are to learn different things from others. So like, I don't know, they notice things at such a young age. I mean, here they're 3 to 6, but even as babies, like they just observe everything to, adapt and grow in the world. And I just think it's super interesting how I say interesting so much. I apologize. But just how attentive they are and how they notice the different behaviors shown and how they're able to reproduce that and to really imitate what they've seen. Um, I also like how Bandura mentioned that it used to be thought that showing aggressive behaviors would decrease the aggressive imitation, but that is not the case. That is that surprises me because I don't know. I mean, personally, I am just not an aggressive person at all. And if I, even on TV, if I'm watching like a fight scene or anything aggressive, I'm just not into it. So I personally don't go into that. I mean, I guess there's definitely some things that lie beneath the surface that I'm sure have definitely imitated as a kid. But I don't know. I mean, seeing that aggressive stuff just freaks me out, and I am go against that. But that's definitely not what Bandura found in these kids. So yeah, so I think that's very interesting and different from what I thought. Um, and then also with the gun thing, how he said that the models did not show the guns, but the kids were able to pick that and use that. I understand that completely because if they had the toy guns in the room, like, I'm pretty sure a kid knows what a gun is. If they don't, then definitely I'm sure they wouldn't um, pick it up. Or even if they don't, if you like, if the kid picked it up and started playing with it, like, I think you can tell. You can just um, make an inference. Oh my gosh. Um, that like, wait, where was I going with that? They can make an inference of what the gun would do and how it is able to make destruction and how it is an aggressive toy. But yeah, so I think that is super interesting and understandable because it is aggressive, and if they're showing these aggressive moves and actions, they're definitely going to do other things that are aggressive that go in the main realm of the violent acts. So yeah. So for the results of the bubble doll experiment, the children who observed the aggressive model made many more imitative aggressive actions than the other two groups. So that's obvious. The 24 kids who had the non-aggressive ones, or the control group who weren't shown any model, they definitely wouldn't just automatically go into the room and start beating up the doll, because I don't think there would be any incentive to do that. But the modeling definitely helps enact that. So in the model, the girls did more physically abusive acts if their model was male, and performed more verbally aggressive acts than when their model was female. So that obviously makes sense. We are definitely taught that men are more of the physically aggressive people. I mean, just in stereotypical society. And obviously the verbal people are going to be the women. And lastly, the boys imitated more physically aggressive acts than the girls did. And so that makes sense to me. And then one thing I thought was surprising was that the boys and the girls mostly matched scores on the rating of verbal aggression. I thought the girls would have been more on the verbal, but they are pretty closely together. And so yeah, that's the bubble doll experiment. And that is the end of our presentation. Thank you guys for listening.